My wife cheated on me with my deadbeat brother and then had the audacity to ask for money years later. When I refused, my brother showed up to my doorstep demanding the money and revealed a shocking secret that changed everything for me. Hey everyone, my name is Jack, I'm 35 years old and I feel like I need to share my story. My life changed completely a few years ago, and now things have gotten even more complicated that it is hard to process. I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My parents worked hard to provide for me and my younger brother, Tom, 30M. We didn't have much, but we were happy. I was always the responsible one, getting good grades and helping around the house. Tom was more free-spirited, always getting into trouble but charming his way out of it. When I was 17, our parents passed away in a car accident. It was the hardest time of my life. I had to grow up fast, taking on the responsibility of looking after Tom, who was only 12 at the time. Our aunt took us in, but she was older and not really equipped to handle two grieving boys. I basically raised Tom from that point on. I worked part-time jobs through high school to save money for college. When I finally got there, it felt like a fresh start. That's where I met Sarah, 34F. She was in my economics class, and we bonded over our shared love of 80s movies and bad puns. We started dating in our sophomore year. Sarah came from a wealthy family, but she never made me feel less than. She was smart, funny, and kind. We'd spend hours talking about our dreams for the future. She wanted to be a successful businesswoman, and I was planning to go into engineering. We supported each other through late-night study sessions and stressful exams. Meanwhile, Tom was struggling in high school. He was smart but unmotivated. I'd try to help him with his homework when I came home on weekends, but he was more interested in partying with his friends. I worried about him, but I thought he'd eventually figure things out. After college, Sarah and I both got good jobs in the city. We dated for 4 years before getting married at 25. The wedding was small but perfect. Tom was my best man, and he gave a touching speech about how I'd always been there for him. I remember feeling so proud of him that day. Sarah and I bought a small house in the suburbs. We were both doing well in our careers and started talking about having kids. But we decided to wait a few years, wanting to enjoy our time as a couple first. About a year after we got married, Tom dropped out of college. He showed up at our doorstep with a duffel bag, asking if he could stay for a while. I couldn't turn him away. Sarah wasn't thrilled, but she understood how important Tom was to me. Tom's stay was supposed to be temporary, just until he got back on his feet. But weeks turned into months. He couldn't hold down a job, always finding excuses for why it didn't work out. He spent most of his time playing video games and going out with friends. Sarah started complaining about his laziness, but I asked her to be patient. I felt responsible for Tom and wanted to help him find his way. As time went on, I noticed changes in Sarah. She became distant and was always on her phone. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say she was just stressed from work. I believed her and tried to be supportive. I started working longer hours, thinking if I could get a promotion, it would ease some of our financial stress. One day, about 5 years into our marriage, I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. As I walked in, I heard noises coming from our bedroom. I found Sarah in bed with Tom. My wife and my brother. The two people I trusted most in the world. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Sarah started crying and Tom just stood there, looking guilty. I told them both to get out. Sarah begged me to let her explain, but I couldn't listen. I threw some of their clothes into bags and told them to leave immediately. The next few days were terrible. Sarah kept calling and texting, trying to apologize. Tom disappeared completely. I found out later that they had been seeing each other for months. My neighbors told me they'd seen Tom's car parked outside our house many times when I was at work. I filed for divorce. Sarah didn't contest it, which made things easier legally but hurt even more emotionally. It felt like she didn't even care enough to fight for our marriage. The divorce was finalized quickly, and I haven't heard from either of them since. That was 3 years ago. I threw myself into work, trying to forget about everything that happened. I sold our house. I couldn't stand being there with all the memories. I moved to a new city, wanting a fresh start. For a long time, I couldn't trust anyone. I avoided dating, focusing instead on my career and my own personal growth. I took up running, started learning a new language, anything to keep my mind occupied. About 6 months ago, I met Lisa, 32F, at a work conference. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of obscure sci-fi novels. She was different from anyone I'd ever met, confident, independent, with a wicked sense of humor. For the first time in years, I found myself wanting to open up to someone. Lisa and I started dating, taking things slow. She knows about my past and has been patient with me as I work through my trust issues. It hasn't been easy, but being with her makes me want to try. Yesterday, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Sarah. She was crying and said she needed to talk to me. I almost hung up, but curiosity got the better of me. She told me that she and Tom had been living together but things had fallen apart. Tom was still unemployed and had developed an addiction. They were deep in debt and about to be evicted. Sarah said she had made a huge mistake and missed me. She asked if I could help them financially, just until they got back on their feet. She even hinted at the possibility of us getting back together, saying she never stopped loving me. I was shocked. After everything they'd done, they had the audacity to ask me for money? I told Sarah that her problems weren't my concern anymore and hung up. But now I'm conflicted. Part of me wants to help because I did love her once, and Tom is still my brother. But another part of me feels like they made their bed and now they have to lie in it. I haven't told Lisa about the call yet. I'm not sure if I should. Am I wrong for refusing to help? Should I at least hear them out? I feel like I'm finally moving on with my life, and I don't want to get sucked back into their drama. But I also feel guilty for turning my back on my family, even if they betrayed me. What should I do? Any advice would be appreciated. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and things have taken an unexpected turn. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. Reading your comments helped me realize that I made the right decision in refusing to help Sarah and Tom. I told Lisa about Sarah's call the day after I posted here. She was understanding but concerned. We agreed that it would be best to block Sarah's number and move on with our lives. I felt relieved after making that decision, thinking it was the end of the story. But it looks like life had other plans. Last Saturday, I was at home alone. Lisa was out of town for a work conference. I heard a knock on the door and assumed it was the delivery I was expecting. When I opened the door, I was shocked to see Tom standing there. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes were worn and dirty. For a moment, I just stared at him, unsure of what to do. Then anger took over, and I started to close the door. But Tom stuck his foot in, preventing me from shutting him out. He said, "Please hear me out. I know I don't deserve it, but I need your help." Against my better judgment, I let him in. I was curious about what he had to say, and part of me wanted answers to questions I'd been carrying for years. Tom sat on my couch, looking around nervously. He told me that Sarah had left him a month ago. She'd taken what little money they had and disappeared. He'd been living in his car, trying to find her. I asked him why he came to me instead of going to the police. He looked ashamed and admitted that he and Sarah had been involved in some illegal activities. They'd been running a small-time scam, targeting lonely older people online and tricking them out of money. It had started as a way to pay off his gambling debts, but it spiraled out of control. I was disgusted. Not only had they betrayed me, but they'd also been taking advantage of vulnerable people. I told Tom he needed to turn himself in, but he begged me not to report them. He said he just wanted to find Sarah and make things right. As angry as I was, I couldn't help but feel pity for my brother. He looked so broken and lost. I told him he could sleep on the couch for one night, but he had to leave in the morning. I made it clear that this was not forgiveness, just basic human decency. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about how different our lives had become. I wondered what our parents would think if they could see us now. In the morning, I woke up to find Tom gone. He'd left a note, thanking me and promising to make things right. I noticed that my wallet, which I'd left on the kitchen counter, was missing $200. I should have known better than to trust him. I was angry at myself for falling for his act, but also worried about what he might do next. I decided to file a police report about the stolen money, hoping it might lead them to investigate Tom and Sarah's scams. Later that day, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Sarah. She said Tom had told her where I lived, and she was coming to see me. She claimed to have information that would change everything and begged me to hear her out. I'm writing this update from a hotel room. I couldn't bear the thought of Sarah showing up at my place, so I left. I haven't responded to her message. I don't know what information she claims to have, but I'm not sure I want to know. Lisa is coming back tomorrow, and I plan to tell her everything. I'm considering moving again, maybe even changing my name. I feel like I'm being dragged back into a past I've been trying so hard to escape. I don't know what to do next. Part of me wants to ignore Sarah's message and continue with my life. But another part is curious about what she has to say. What if it really does change everything? Am I making a mistake by not hearing her out? I'll update again when I've decided what to do. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and I'm still trying to process everything that's happened. I want to thank everyone who commented and sent messages of support. Your advice helped me navigate through some tough decisions. After thinking on it for some time, I decided to meet with Sarah. I know many of you advised against it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed closure. I arranged to meet her in a public place, a busy cafe near my office. When Sarah arrived, I couldn't even tell it was her. She looked older, tired, and there was a sadness in her eyes that I'd never seen before. As soon as she sat down, she started crying. I felt uncomfortable and considered leaving, but I stayed, reminding myself that I was there for answers, not reconciliation. Once she calmed down, Sarah told me a story that I never expected to hear. She said that shortly after we got married, she discovered she was pregnant. She was excited but nervous to tell me because we had agreed to wait a few years before having kids. Before she could break the news, she overheard a conversation between Tom and me. According to Sarah, Tom was telling me about a one-night stand he'd had, and that the girl was now claiming to be pregnant. She said she heard me advise Tom to deny everything and cut all contact with the girl. Sarah was shocked and disappointed by my response. I interrupted her here, telling her that I had no memory of such a conversation. She insisted it happened and said it changed the way she saw me. She decided not to tell me about her pregnancy, fearing that I might react the same way Tom did. Sarah then dropped a bombshell. She said she had the baby in secret and gave it up for adoption. She claimed that the stress and guilt of hiding this from me drove her into Tom's arms. She said their affair wasn't about love or lust, but a shared secret and mutual self-destruction. I sat there, stunned. My mind was reeling. I had no recollection of the conversation she mentioned, and the idea that I had a child out there somewhere was overwhelming. I asked Sarah for proof, but she said she had none. She had destroyed all evidence of the pregnancy and adoption to protect the child's privacy. I left the cafe feeling more confused than ever. Part of me wanted to believe Sarah, to find some explanation for her betrayal that wasn't just selfishness. But another part of me was skeptical. Why come forward with this information now, years later? I spent the next few weeks investigating. I combed through our old financial records, looking for any unexplained expenses that might corroborate Sarah's story. I even hired a private investigator to look into adoption records from that time period. The investigator couldn't find any concrete evidence of an adoption, but he did uncover something interesting. There were several large withdrawals from our joint account during the time Sarah claimed to be pregnant, which I had never noticed before. It wasn't proof, but it made me wonder. I also reached out to some old friends and family members, asking if they remembered anything unusual about Sarah during that time. Most said no, but one of Sarah's cousins mentioned that Sarah had gone on a long work trip for a few months, which lined up with when she would have been in the later stages of pregnancy. As for Tom, he seemed to have disappeared again. The police hadn't been able to locate him after I reported the stolen money. Part of me hoped he'd turn himself in and could corroborate Sarah's story, but I wasn't holding my breath. All of this has left me feeling lost and conflicted. If Sarah's story is true, it means I have a child out there somewhere. A child who would be around 10 years old now. The thought keeps me up at night. But if it's a lie, it's the cruelest manipulation I can imagine. I haven't told Lisa about any of this yet. I'm afraid it will be too much for her, that she'll see me as someone with too much baggage. But I also feel guilty keeping it from her. I'm considering hiring a lawyer to look into the adoption records more thoroughly. But I'm also terrified of what I might find. What if I do have a child out there? Do I have the right to disrupt their life after all this time? I feel like I'm standing at a crossroads, and every path leads to more pain and uncertainty. I don't know what to do next. Should I pursue the truth about this possible child? Should I let it go and try to move on with my life? And what about Sarah and Tom? Do I owe them anything after all this? I'll update again when I've made a decision. Until then, I need to take some time off to properly think about this decision moving forward. Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and a lot has changed. I want to thank everyone who's followed my story and offered support and advice. Your words have been a source of strength during this difficult time. After much soul-searching and lengthy discussions with Lisa, I decided to pursue the truth about the child Sarah claimed to have given up for adoption. I hired a lawyer specializing in adoption cases and gave them all the information I had. The investigation took several months and was emotionally draining. There were moments when I thought about giving up, but Lisa encouraged me to see it through. Her support has been unwavering, and I'm grateful to have her in my life. 2 months ago, we finally got some answers. The lawyer found records of an adoption that matched the time frame and circumstances Sarah had described. A baby girl was given up for adoption 10 years ago, and the birth mother's details matched Sarah's. The news hit me hard. I had a daughter out there. A child I never knew existed. The range of emotions I experienced was overwhelming: anger at Sarah for keeping this from me, sadness for the years I'd missed, and a strange sense of joy at knowing I was a father. My lawyer advised me about my options. I could potentially seek to establish paternity and pursue some form of custody or visitation. However, after careful consideration, I decided not to disrupt my daughter's life. She has adoptive parents who have raised her for 10 years. It wouldn't be fair to her to suddenly appear and complicate her world. Instead, I've arranged to have a letter and some medical history information held in trust for her. If she ever decides to seek out her birth parents when she's older, she'll have access to this information. It's not much, but it's something. As for Sarah and Tom, there have been some developments. Tom was arrested 2 months ago for fraud related to the scams he and Sarah had been running. He's currently awaiting trial. The police found him trying to pull the same scam in another state. It turns out he never really intended to make things right as he had promised. Sarah reached out to me again, asking for help with Tom's legal fees. She claimed she had no part in the scams and that Tom had manipulated her. I didn't believe her. I declined to help and told her not to contact me again. This time, I made sure to block her number and email address. Lisa and I are still together. I told her everything, and while it was a lot for her to process, she's been incredibly supportive. We had many long conversations about what all of this means for our relationship. Lisa admitted that she was scared at first, worried that I might want to get back with Sarah or that the existence of my daughter would change things between us. But we worked through those fears together. We're taking things slow, but I can see a future with Lisa. She's helped me realize that I can trust again, that not everyone will betray me like Sarah and Tom did. We're talking about moving in together soon. I've also started therapy to work through my trust issues and the complex emotions surrounding the discovery of my daughter. At first, I was resistant to the idea, thinking I could handle everything on my own. But Lisa gently encouraged me to give it a try, and I'm glad I did. It's been helpful in ways I didn't expect. My therapist has been helping me process my feelings about Sarah, Tom, and my daughter. We've been working on techniques to manage anxiety and cope with uncertainty. I'm learning that it's okay to feel angry and hurt, but also that I don't have to let those feelings control my life. One unexpected outcome of all this is that I've reconnected with my aunt, the one who took Tom and me in after our parents passed away. We had drifted apart over the years, especially after what happened with Sarah and Tom. But when I told her about my daughter, She was incredibly supportive. She shared stories about my parents that I had never heard before, and it felt good to have that connection to my past again. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect now. I still have days where I'm angry about everything that happened. I wonder about my daughter and hope she's happy and loved. Sometimes I feel guilty for not being part of her life, even though I know staying away is the right decision for now. But overall, I'm in a much better place than I was when I first posted here. I'm focusing on building a life with Lisa, advancing in my career, and taking care of my mental health. I've even started volunteering at a local youth center, mentoring kids who come from difficult backgrounds. In a way, it helps me feel connected to the daughter I may never know. To those who are going through similar situations, I want to say this: it gets better. It might not feel like it now, but time does help. Surround yourself with good people, be honest with yourself and others, and don't be afraid to seek help when you need it. Thank you all reading this if you have made it this far. Your support has definitely helped more than you can imagine, and I hope not to return here with another similar story and a better instead. I'm closing this chapter of my life now.